The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Combat Academy stretched out like a metal canyon. Beings from across known space filled the massive room, their different shapes and colors creating a living rainbow of alien life. Some floated in special tanks filled with glowing gas. Others stood on multiple legs that clicked against the metal floor. A few hung from the ceiling, their wings folded against their backs. Marcus Chen walked through the main entrance, his heavy boots making loud sounds on the floor. Every step echoed in the huge space. He looked around at the other beings and felt very small. Not because he was short, he stood 6 feet tall, which was average for humans. He felt small because he was alone. Earth had sent only one person to represent all of humanity. One man with basic gear against hundreds of beings with technology that seemed like magic. Marcus adjusted the straps on his chest plate and kept walking toward the registration area. The other delegates noticed him right away. It was hard not to. His equipment looked so different from theirs. Where they had smooth, glowing weapons that hummed with energy, Marcus carried what looked like old metal tools. His boots were thick leather and steel. His gloves were made of some kind of rough fabric. Even his uniform looked simple compared to the flowing robes and crystal armor worn by the others. A group of tall, thin beings with blue skin whispered to each other as he passed. Their language sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Marcus caught a few words, something about primitive and amusing. He kept his face calm and continued walking. The registration desk was run by a robot that looked like a floating metal sphere. Red lights blinked on its surface as it scanned each delegate. When Marcus stepped up, the lights turned blue for a moment, then back to red. Species? The robot asked in a voice that sounded like it came from inside a metal box. Human, Marcus said. Planet of origin? Earth. Technological classification? The robot paused, its lights blinking faster. Unable to determine from scan. Please state manually. Marcus thought about this question. How could he explain Earth's technology when most of it was hidden inside gear that looked old? Mixed systems, he said finally. Unclear response. Please specify primary energy source for weapons and equipment. Chemical and mechanical, Marcus replied. This was true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. The robot's lights turned yellow. Warning. Participant appears to be using outdated technology. Safety protocols may need adjustment. Please proceed to waiting area. Marcus took his registration card and walked toward the area where other delegates waited for the opening ceremony. As he moved through the crowd, more beings stopped their conversations to stare at him. Some pointed with arms, tentacles, or other body parts. Others made sounds that he guessed were laughter. Near the back of the waiting area, Marcus found an empty spot and sat down on a metal bench. He placed his gear bag on the floor and pulled out a water bottle. The bottle was made of simple plastic, not the glowing containers that other beings drank from. Even something as basic as water seemed to mark him as different. A small creature that looked like a cross between a cat and a lizard approached him. Its scales changed color as it moved, shifting from green to blue to purple. Excuse me, it said in a high voice that sounded like music. Are you really here for the combat championship? Yes, Marcus said, but your equipment. The creature's scales turned orange, which Marcus guessed meant confusion. It looks very old. Are you sure it will work against modern weapons? Marcus smiled a little. It's worked so far. Where did you get it? A museum? Before Marcus could answer, a loud voice filled the hall. The sound came from speakers hidden in the walls and ceiling. Welcome, delegates, to the annual Interspecies Combat Championship. Please gather in the main area for the opening ceremony. The creature's scales turned yellow, probably excitement, and it scurried away to join a group of similar beings. Marcus stood up, shouldered his gear bag, and walked toward the center of the hall with everyone else. The main area had a raised platform where several important-looking beings stood. In the center was a tall woman with skin that looked like it was made of crystal. Light seemed to come from inside her body, making her glow with a soft blue color. When she moved, the light shifted and danced under her skin. That's Commander Veltara, someone whispered nearby. She's from the Zephyrian hegemony. They say she's never lost a fight. Marcus studied the commander as she began to speak. Her voice was beautiful, like a song mixed with normal words. But there was something cold in it too, like ice under pretty music. Fellow beings, she said, we gather once again to test our skills and honor our civilizations. The combat championship is more than a contest. It shows the galaxy who is strong and who is weak. Who deserves to lead and who should follow? Her glowing eyes moved across the crowd and stopped when they found Marcus. For a moment, she just stared at him. Then her lips curved into what might have been a smile, but not a friendly one. I see we have interesting participants this year, she continued. Some who may not understand what they have gotten themselves into. Marcus felt many eyes turning toward him. He kept his expression calm and his hands relaxed at his sides. He had learned long ago that the best response to someone trying to make you angry was to show no reaction at all. Commander Veltara gestured toward a large screen that dropped down from the ceiling. Images began to play showing past championships. Beings fought with weapons that shot beams of light. Others used their minds to move objects without touching them. Some changed their shape or size during battle. These are the standards you must meet, Veltara said. Power, speed, intelligence, technology. The galaxy has no place for those who cannot keep up with progress. The images on the screen showed more advanced weapons and abilities. Beings who could fly without wings, armor that could stop any attack, weapons that could cut through anything. Marcus watched it all with interest. He had studied many of these technologies before coming here. Earth scientists had learned a lot about alien abilities from the few peaceful contacts they had made. But Earth had also learned to keep its own abilities secret. The first trial will begin tomorrow, Commander Veltara announced. Rest well tonight. Some of you will need all the help you can get. Her eyes found Marcus again as she said this last part. Around the hall, various forms of alien laughter filled the air. Marcus heard the wind chime voices of the blue beings, the musical chirping of the cat-lizard creatures, and dozens of other sounds that meant amusement to their species. Marcus picked up his gear bag and headed for the exit. Tomorrow would be interesting. He had come here with a mission, to show the galaxy that humanity deserved a place among the stars. But first he had to survive whatever tests they would put him through. As he walked toward the door, he heard more whispers and comments about his primitive gear. Let them think what they wanted. Marcus had learned that sometimes the best advantage was being underestimated. He reached the door and stepped into the corridor that led to the living quarters. Behind him, the hall buzzed with excitement and conversation. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, Marcus would rest and prepare for what was coming. His heavy boots echoed in the empty corridor as he walked to his room. Each step was steady and sure, like the man who made them. The next morning, all the delegates gathered in the assembly hall again. This time, they sat in curved rows that faced a large stage. The lighting was brighter than the day before, and Marcus could see every detail of the beings around him. Some had fur that changed color in the light. Others had scales that made rainbow patterns. A few seemed to be made of living metal that reflected everything around them. Marcus sat in the back row, his gear arranged neatly beside his chair. His water bottle sat on the floor next to his boots. Everything about him looked simple compared to the advanced equipment that other delegates carried. A floating robot approached the stage and began speaking in that same metal box voice from yesterday. Welcome to the pre-competition briefing. Today you will learn about the trials ahead. The combat championship consists of 3 main tests. Each test will challenge different abilities: survival skills, combat skills, strategic thinking. The robot paused while images appeared on screens around the hall. The pictures showed dangerous environments: burning deserts, frozen wastelands, and dark caves filled with unknown creatures. Safety is our primary concern, the robot continued. All weapons will be set to non-lethal modes. Medical teams will monitor each participant. However, the environments and challenges are real. Injury is possible. Failure to complete a trial results in immediate elimination. Marcus listened carefully to every word. He had studied the championship rules for months before coming here, but hearing them again helped him focus his mind. Commander Veltara stood up from her seat in the front row. The crystal patterns under her skin began to glow brighter, and small sparks of electricity danced between her fingers. When she spoke, her musical voice carried easily through the hall. Before we continue, she said, I believe we should address something that concerns all of us. She turned to face the assembled delegates, her glowing eyes scanning the crowd until they found Marcus. Yesterday, I noticed that we have a participant whose equipment seems unusual. She gestured toward Marcus with one long, elegant arm. I think we should discuss whether this is fair to the other competitors. Murmurs spread through the hall. Many beings turned to look at Marcus, their various eyes and sensory organs focusing on him and his gear. "What do you mean?" asked a delegate with green skin and 4 arms. His voice sounded like gravel rolling down a hill. Veltara's lips curved into that cold smile again. "Look at his equipment. Metal boots when we have gravitic manipulation systems. Chemical projectile weapons when we have quantum disruptors. Fabric clothing when we have adaptive armor systems." She began walking slowly down the aisle, her movements graceful and predatory. The light from her skin cast moving shadows on the walls. "I understand that different species develop at different rates," she continued. "Some reach the stars quickly. Others take longer. But this human appears to be using technology from his planet's ancient past." Laughter began to spread through the hall. The wind chime beings made their musical sounds. The cat-lizard creatures chirped and whistled. A group of beings that looked like walking trees creaked and rustled in their version of amusement. Marcus sat quietly, watching Veltara approach. His hands rested calmly in his lap. His breathing was slow and steady. He looked like a man listening to an interesting story, not someone being publicly mocked. "Perhaps," Veltara said, now standing just a few rows away from Marcus. "This human is lost. Perhaps he meant to attend a historical reenactment instead of a serious combat competition." The laughter grew louder. Some beings began pointing at Marcus's gear and making comments to their neighbors. Marcus heard words in several languages that probably meant primitive and backward. Veltara raised her hand, and the electricity dancing around her fingers grew brighter. The hall became quiet. "Those metal boots must weigh more than some of our smaller delegates," she said. "How can he possibly move quickly enough to compete? And those weapons, do they even have enough power to affect modern armor?" A delegate with purple skin and tentacles instead of arms spoke up. "Maybe we should create a separate category for antique weapons," it said in a voice like bubbling water. "That way the human can participate without embarrassing himself." More laughter filled the hall. Even some of the serious-looking delegates in the front rows were making sounds of amusement. Marcus finally stood up. The laughter didn't stop, but it got quieter. He was taller than many of the beings around him, and something about the way he moved made a few delegates stop laughing entirely. "Commander Veltara," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly through the hall. "Are you challenging my right to be here?" Veltara's eyes brightened with what looked like pleasure. "Not your right, human. Your ability. The combat championship is meant to test the best that each species can offer. If humanity's best is—" She gestured at his gear again. "Then perhaps humanity is not ready to join the galactic community as an equal." The hall became very quiet. What had started as casual mockery was now becoming something more serious. Marcus could feel the attention of every being in the room focused on him and Veltara. "What are you suggesting?" Marcus asked. Veltara's smile became wider, showing teeth that looked like they were made of the same crystal as her skin. "A wager," she said. "When you fail the first trial, and you will fail, humanity withdraws from the combat championship permanently. Your species accepts its place as a junior member of the galactic community. No military contracts, no territorial claims, no voice in matters of war and peace." Gasps and whispers spread through the hall. This was much more than anyone had expected. The stakes Veltara was proposing would affect all of humanity's future in space. "And if I succeed?" Marcus asked. "If you somehow complete the first trial," Veltara said, "the Zephyrian hegemony will formally acknowledge human military capability. We will support humanity's applications for defense contracts and territorial expansion." The robot on the stage began to speak. "This type of wager is not part of standard championship procedures. The championship allows for honor challenges between species," Veltara interrupted. "This is perfectly legal under the rules." Marcus looked around the hall. Every being was watching him, waiting to see what he would do. Some looked excited at the drama. Others looked worried about what might happen. A few looked like they felt sorry for him. "Commander Veltara," Marcus said slowly, "I accept your wager." The hall erupted in noise. Beings talked excitedly to each other in dozens of different languages. Some made sounds that might have been cheering. Others seemed shocked that Marcus had agreed to such dangerous terms. Veltara raised her hand again, and the electricity around her fingers grew so bright that it cast sharp shadows across her face. "Excellent," she said, "but I have one question, human. When you fail, and you will fail you at least put up an entertaining struggle?" Or will your primitive gear break down immediately? Marcus looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady. Commander, before the trial begins, would you mind if I made a small adjustment to my equipment? He gestured toward his gear. Since you're concerned about the weight, perhaps I should lighten the load a little. Veltara's laugh was like breaking glass mixed with music. By all means, human. Remove whatever you wish. It won't make any difference to the outcome. Marcus nodded politely. Thank you. I think you'll find the results interesting. The hall buzzed with anticipation. Tomorrow's trial had suddenly become much more important than anyone had expected. Marcus sat back down and began checking his equipment, his movements careful and methodical. Veltara returned to her seat, her skin still glowing with satisfaction. She had no idea what was about to happen. The floating robot moved to the center of the stage while the noise in the hall slowly died down. Its red lights blinked in a steady pattern as it waited for complete silence. The first trial will test survival skills and adaptability, the robot announced. Participants will enter a simulation chamber that creates real environmental challenges. The simulation adapts to each participant's actions, becoming more difficult as they progress. Images appeared on the screens showing a large dome-shaped room filled with strange equipment. Steam rose from vents in the floor. Ice covered some walls while others glowed with heat. Strange creatures moved in the shadows. The environment will include extreme temperatures, electromagnetic interference, toxic atmospheres, and hostile wildlife. The robot continued. Participants must survive for 1 full hour while completing 3 objectives. Find and retrieve a data crystal. Neutralize a target using approved methods. Reach the extraction point before time expires. Marcus studied the images carefully. The simulation looked dangerous, but he had trained in worse conditions on Earth. Hidden military bases in Antarctica. Desert survival courses in the Sahara. Underground caves where electronic equipment failed and only basic tools worked. Safety protocols are in place, the robot said. However, the simulation uses real environmental effects. Real cold, real heat, real atmospheric pressure changes. Participants have been injured in previous years. Medical teams will monitor all vital signs and extract anyone in immediate danger. A delegate with silver skin and no visible eyes raised one of its 4 hands. What about equipment restrictions? Participants may use any gear they brought to the championship, the robot replied. However, lethal weapons are prohibited. All projectile weapons will be loaded with training ammunition only. Energy weapons will be limited to stunning levels. Veltara stood up again, her crystal skin glowing brighter than before. Small arcs of electricity jumped between her fingers and ran along her arms. I have a question about our human friend, she said, her musical voice carrying a note of amusement. His equipment appears to be purely mechanical. How will the safety systems monitor him if he has no electronic interfaces? The robot's lights flickered for a moment. All participants will be fitted with monitoring devices before entering the simulation. But what if his primitive gear interferes with the monitoring systems? Veltara asked. What if the simulation cannot adapt properly to his unique technology level? Marcus could see where this was going. Veltara was trying to create additional obstacles for him before the trial even began. She wanted to make sure he failed. The simulation system is designed to handle any technology level, the robot said, from pure biological entities to advanced artificial intelligences. Really? Veltara's smile became sharper. Then perhaps we should make this more interesting. Since the human claims his ancient equipment is adequate, why don't we increase the difficulty for all participants? A murmur of concern spread through the hall. Several delegates looked worried about making the trial harder. The simulation difficulty is set, according to established safety protocols. The robot replied. But the rules allow for voluntary difficulty increases, Veltara said. If all participants agree, the challenge level can be raised. She turned to face the assembled delegates, her glowing eyes moving from being to being. I propose we increase the simulation to level 7, she announced. That will separate the truly capable from the pretenders. Gasps echoed through the hall. Marcus had studied the championship records. Level 7 simulations had a 40% failure rate even among experienced competitors. Many participants suffered serious injuries at that level. Level 7 is typically reserved for championship finals, a delegate protested. This one looked like a large insect with blue-green chitin covering its body. Using it for the first trial seems excessive. Are you afraid? Veltara asked, electricity dancing more wildly around her fingers. The Zephyrian hegemony has no fear of increased difficulty. We welcome the chance to prove our superiority. Marcus watched as delegates began arguing among themselves. Some species were confident in their abilities and didn't mind the increased challenge. Others worried about the safety risks. A few seemed excited by the dramatic escalation. "What does the human think?" called out a delegate from near the front. "This affects him most of all." All eyes turned to Marcus. He sat quietly for a moment thinking about the situation. Veltara was trying to stack the odds against him even more than they already were. She wanted to make sure he failed spectacularly. But Marcus had a secret. The harder the trial became, the more advantages humans would have. Extreme environments were where humans excelled. Earth was a death world compared to most planets that had produced intelligent life. Humans had evolved to survive conditions that would kill most other species. "I have no objection to level 7, Marcus said calmly. Veltara's eyes brightened with satisfaction. "Excellent. Then I call for a vote. All in favor of increasing the simulation difficulty to level 7. Hands, tentacles, claws, and other appendages rose throughout the hall. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. The trial would be much more dangerous than originally planned. "Motion approved," the robot announced. "The first trial will be conducted at level 7 difficulty. Participants should prepare accordingly." The briefing continued with technical details about the simulation chamber and safety procedures. Marcus listened carefully, but part of his mind was already working on strategy. Level 7 meant the environmental challenges would be extreme. Temperatures that could freeze or burn, atmospheric pressure that could crush, air that might be toxic or too thin to breathe. It also meant the simulation's adaptive intelligence would be much more aggressive. The hostile wildlife would be deadlier. The objectives would be harder to find and complete. The extraction point might move or be defended by multiple threats. But it also meant that his opponents would be struggling against conditions they rarely faced. Most species lived on comfortable worlds with stable climates. They relied on technology to protect them from environmental extremes. When that technology was stressed or failed, they would be vulnerable. Humans, on the other hand, had spent millions of years adapting to a planet that was actively trying to kill them. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, massive storms, droughts, floods. Earth had thrown everything at humanity, and they had survived it all. After the briefing ended, delegates began filing out of the hall. Many stopped to talk to each other, forming alliances or sharing information about their species' capabilities. Marcus noticed that several groups looked in his direction while they talked, but none approached him directly. Veltara walked past his row on her way to the exit. She paused and looked down at him, her crystal skin pulsing with soft light. "I hope you've said goodbye to your homeworld," she said quietly. "After tomorrow, humanity's dreams of joining the galactic community will be over." Marcus looked up at her with calm eyes. "Commander, you asked if I could lighten my equipment load. Yes, remove whatever you want. It won't help you." "Thank you," Marcus said. "I think you'll be surprised at how much difference it makes." Veltara laughed, a sound like crystal wind chimes breaking. "The only surprise will be how quickly you fail." She walked away, electricity still crackling around her fingers. Other delegates followed, their various forms of communication filling the hall with a mix of sounds. Marcus remained seated, looking at his gear. Tomorrow, he would show the galaxy something they had never seen before, a human without restraints. A member of Earth's species operating at full capability. He picked up his water bottle and took a long drink. The plastic felt warm in his hands, heated by his body temperature. Such a simple thing, but it represented something important. Human engineering. Human materials. Human solutions to basic problems. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective. And sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe was a human who had been underestimated. Marcus stood up, gathered his gear, and walked toward the exit. His heavy boots echoed in the nearly empty hall, each step steady and sure. Tomorrow would be very interesting indeed. The simulation chamber was even larger than Marcus had expected. The dome stretched up nearly 100 feet above the floor, and the walls curved away into shadows that the lights couldn't quite reach. Equipment covered every surface: sensors, projectors, environmental controls, and safety systems that could create any condition found on known worlds. Delegates filled the observation deck that surrounded the chamber. Through the thick, transparent walls, Marcus could see hundreds of beings watching as the final preparations were made. Some held recording devices, others whispered to companions about what they expected to see. Veltara stood at the front of the observation deck, her crystal skin glowing brighter than usual. She had positioned herself where Marcus could see her clearly, and her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Marcus stood in the center of the chamber floor with his gear arranged around him. The other participants were being prepared in separate chambers, but his trial would be conducted first. As the challenger in Veltara's wager, he had the honor of going before the assembled delegates. Participant Chen announced the floating robot that served as trial coordinator. "You have 5 minutes to make final equipment adjustments before the simulation begins." Marcus nodded and looked up at the observation deck. Every eye sensor and recording device was focused on him. The moment had come to show them what humanity really was. "Before I begin," Marcus called out, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's communication system, "I'd like to thank Commander Veltara for her concern about my equipment weight." He gestured toward his gear. "She's absolutely right. This is quite heavy. I think it's time to lighten the load." Marcus knelt down beside his boots. They looked like simple leather and steel construction, but hidden latches clicked as he touched specific points. The boots split open along seams that hadn't been visible before, revealing complex inner mechanisms. "Gravity compensators," Marcus said as he pulled the mechanisms out of the boots. "Earth has higher gravity than most worlds. We use these to adjust when visiting planets with weaker gravitational fields." He set the devices aside and stood up. Immediately his posture changed. Without the artificial weight pulling him down, he moved with fluid grace that hadn't been apparent before. His steps became lighter, more controlled. Murmurs spread through the observation deck. Several delegates leaned forward to get a better look at what was happening. Next, Marcus began removing his gloves. Like the boots, they looked simple until he touched hidden controls. The gloves split apart to reveal intricate inner workings. "Strength limiters and fine motor control dampeners," he explained. "Human strength can be as problematic when dealing with more delicate species and equipment. These help us avoid accidentally breaking things." He flexed his fingers experimentally. Without the limiters, his movements became precisely controlled in ways that made several delegates step back from the observation windows. The way he moved his hands suggested capabilities that went far beyond normal human ranges. Marcus reached for his chest plate next. What had appeared to be simple metal armor began to unfold as he activated release mechanisms. Sections split away to reveal a complex system of tubes, wires, and monitoring devices. "Atmospheric processor and biological regulation system," he said, pulling away component after component. "This maintains Earth normal atmospheric pressure and oxygen content. It also regulates body temperature, heart rate, and adrenaline production to keep me within safe operating parameters." As each piece came away, Marcus seemed to change. His breathing became deeper and more controlled. His skin took on a healthier color. His eyes became clearer and more focused. But the most dramatic change came when he removed what looked like a simple metal band from around his neck. "Neural inhibitor," he said quietly. "This one is important. It prevents the fight-or-flight response from engaging fully, keeps reaction times within normal ranges, stops the combat instincts from taking over." The moment the neural inhibitor came off, every being in the observation deck felt something change. Marcus didn't look different exactly, but his presence seemed to expand. The way he held himself became predatory in a way that set off alarm responses in species that had evolved to recognize dangerous predators. "Participant Chen," the robot said, its voice containing what might have been concern. "Your biometric readings are exceeding normal parameters. Are you experiencing any distress?" Marcus looked up at the robot, and his smile was nothing like the polite expression he had worn for the past 2 days. "I'm feeling much better, actually," he said. "For the first time since I arrived, I feel like myself." In the observation deck, Veltara's glowing skin had begun to flicker. Her smile was gone, replaced by an expression of growing concern. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. "Those devices, they weren't primitive equipment. They were restraints." Marcus began removing the last few pieces of his gear, power regulators from his weapons, mobility dampeners from his clothing. Each device that came away revealed that what had looked like ancient technology was actually sophisticated control systems. "Commander Veltara," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "You asked if my equipment was adequate for this competition. The truth is, it was never meant to help me perform better. It was meant to keep me from performing too well." He stood in the center of the chamber, no longer wearing any of the bulky gear that had made him look primitive. His actual equipment was sleek and efficient, integrated into his clothing and barely visible. But more importantly, he moved like a completely different person. "You see," Marcus continued, "humans don't wear enhancement gear. We wear limiters. We wear restraints. We wear systems designed to keep us operating within parameters that other species can understand and handle." The observation deck had become completely silent. Even the mechanical sounds of the station seemed muted. "When we first met other species, we discovered something unfortunate," Marcus said. "Humans evolved on what you would call a death world. Everything about our planet tried to kill us for millions of years. We adapted. We became very good at surviving, maybe too good." He picked up one of his weapons, something that had looked like a simple projectile launcher. With the power limiters removed, energy readings from the device made several monitoring systems activate warning alarms. "So we created the diplomatic protocol," Marcus said. "Voluntary limitations on human performance when interacting with other species. We handicap ourselves to avoid making others uncomfortable. We pretend to be weaker, slower, and less capable than we actually are." He looked directly at Veltara through the observation window. "You wanted to see what humans are really capable of. You wanted to test us at level 7 difficulty. Thank you for giving me permission to remove the safety systems." Marcus moved to the center of the chamber and assumed a ready position. Without the restraints, his posture was that of a predator preparing to hunt. "Trial administrator," he called to the robot. "I'm ready to begin." The robot's lights flickered rapidly. "Participant Chen, your biometric readings are still outside normal parameters. Heart rate and blood pressure are elevated. Brain activity shows unusual patterns." "That's normal for an unrestrained human," Marcus said. "We're designed for combat conditions. This is how we're supposed to function." In the observation deck, delegates were backing away from the windows. Some were making distressed sounds in their native languages. Others were activating emergency communication devices to contact their home governments. Veltara pressed against the observation window, her crystal skin flickering between different colors as her emotions shifted rapidly. "This is impossible," she whispered. "No species voluntarily limits itself. No one chooses to appear weaker than they are." Marcus looked up at her one more time before the trial began. "Commander," he said, "you're about to learn something important about humans. We don't choose to be weak. We choose to be civilized. There's a difference." The robot's voice echoed through the chamber. "Level 7 simulation commencing in 10 seconds. Marcus smiled, and every being in the observation deck felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. "Let's begin," he said. The simulation began with a sound like thunder. The chamber filled with swirling mist as environmental systems activated throughout the dome. Temperature readings on the observation deck displays showed rapid changes, freezing cold in some areas, burning heat in others. Atmospheric pressure fluctuated wildly. Warning lights flashed as the Level 7 simulation created conditions that would challenge even the most advanced species. Marcus stood in the center of it all, completely calm. The first test came within seconds. The temperature around him dropped to 40 degrees below zero. Ice began forming on the chamber walls. Most species would need heated suits or energy shields to survive such cold. Their equipment would slow down or fail entirely. Marcus simply adjusted his breathing and kept moving. Humans had survived ice ages. They had lived in the Arctic long before they had advanced technology. Cold was uncomfortable, but it wasn't deadly. Not to a species that had learned to hunt mammoth in blizzards. The observation deck monitors showed his body temperature holding steady despite the extreme cold. His movement speed actually increased as he adapted to the environment. "Impossible," whispered one of the delegates. "No biological entity can maintain function in those temperatures without technological assistance." But Marcus was just getting started. The simulation's artificial intelligence, designed to adapt and challenge participants, created the first hostile encounter. A creature made of energy and metal materialized. In front of Marcus, something like a robotic wolf with claws that could cut through most known materials. The creature lunged at him with speed that would overwhelm most beings. But Marcus was no longer operating under the restrictions that had made him seem slow and clumsy. He moved aside with fluid grace, letting the creature pass harmlessly by. Then he turned and struck it with his bare hand. The impact rang through the chamber like a bell. The creature, designed to withstand energy weapons and advanced technology, simply stopped working. Marcus had hit it with such precise force that he had disrupted its internal mechanisms. In the observation deck, several delegates made sounds of shock. The creature had been built to require coordinated attacks from multiple participants using advanced weapons. Marcus had disabled it with a single perfectly placed strike. His strength reading, one of them managed to say, "They're off the charts." The simulation escalated quickly. The artificial intelligence, programmed to provide appropriate challenges, began throwing everything it had at Marcus. The temperature swung from freezing to boiling. Toxic gases filled parts of the chamber. Electromagnetic pulses that would disable most technology crackled through the air. Marcus moved through it all like he was taking a walk in a park. The toxic gases that would poison most species. Humans had evolved to process a remarkable variety of atmospheric compositions. Marcus's lungs filtered out the harmful elements while extracting the oxygen he needed. The electromagnetic interference that scrambled advanced electronics. Marcus's backup equipment was purely mechanical and chemical. Stone Age reliable, the kind of technology that worked regardless of external conditions. But it was his response to the simulation's adaptive combat scenarios that truly shocked the watching delegates. The artificial intelligence created increasingly complex threats, trying to find something that would challenge him. Energy weapons that fired from multiple directions. Gravity wells that should have trapped him in place. Swarms of smaller robotic creatures that attacked in coordinated patterns. Marcus dealt with each threat using methods that the simulation couldn't predict or counter. When gravity wells tried to trap him, he used them to accelerate his movement in unexpected directions. When energy weapons fired at him, he moved in patterns that seemed to violate physics, dodging shots that should have been impossible to avoid. Most shocking of all was his use of the environment itself as a weapon. When the simulation created a pit of boiling acid to block his path, Marcus didn't try to go around it. Instead, he used the thermal updrafts from the acid to launch himself across the chamber in a way that no other species would have attempted. "He's not just surviving the environment," observed one delegate, her voice full of awe. "He's using it. He's making it work for him." The simulation's artificial intelligence began to show signs of strain. It had been designed to challenge species that relied on technology and logical problem-solving, but Marcus was using intuition, instinct, and physical capabilities that the AI couldn't analyze or predict. When the simulation created a maze of laser grids that should have required careful technical analysis to navigate, Marcus simply moved through them using reflexes and spatial awareness that operated faster than the AI could adapt. When it presented him with a complex puzzle that should have taken significant time to solve, Marcus approached it with a kind of creative thinking that bypassed the logical pathways entirely. "The first objective," announced the trial robot. "Participant Chen has located and retrieved the data crystal." Marcus had found the hidden crystal in less than 10 minutes. Most participants took 30 minutes or more, even at lower difficulty levels. "Second objective," the robot continued a few minutes later. "Target neutralized using approved methods." Marcus had dealt with the combat target, a heavily armored training robot, by simply throwing it into one of the environmental hazards the simulation had created. The robot had been destroyed by its own defensive systems when it tried to process conflicting damage reports. "Third objective," the robot announced. "Participant approaching extraction point." But then something unprecedented happened. The simulation's artificial intelligence, pushed beyond its normal parameters by Marcus's unpredictable success, began to malfunction. Instead of maintaining level 7 difficulty, it escalated further. The environmental systems went into overdrive. Temperatures that would kill most known life forms, atmospheric pressure that could crush vehicles, gravity fluctuations that should have liquefied any biological entity. Warning alarms filled the observation deck. Safety systems activated automatically as the simulation exceeded all established protocols. "Emergency shutdown initiated," the trial robot announced. "Simulation exceeding safe parameters." But the shutdown systems were too slow. For a few crucial moments, Marcus was trapped in conditions that should have been instantly fatal, and he thrived, moving through gravity fields that should have immobilized him, breathing air that should have burned his lungs. operating in temperatures that should have boiled his blood. It wasn't just that he survived impossible conditions. He moved through them with the same calm efficiency he had shown throughout the trial, as if extremes that would destroy advanced technology and kill virtually any known species were simply minor inconveniences. When the emergency shutdown finally stopped the simulation, Marcus stood in the center of the chamber completely unharmed. His breathing was slightly elevated, but he showed no signs of distress from the ordeal. The observation deck was absolutely silent. Delegates stared at him through the transparent walls with expressions of shock, fear, and dawning understanding. Some were recording everything with trembling appendages. Others had backed away from the windows entirely. Trial completed, the robot announced in a voice that somehow managed to sound stunned despite being artificial. All objectives achieved. Time elapsed 18 minutes, 37 seconds. Marcus looked up at the observation deck and found Veltara's face among the crowd. Her crystal skin had gone completely dark except for faint, fearful flickering around her eyes. "Commander," he called out, his voice carrying clearly through the communication system. "I believe this concludes our wager." Veltara opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Around her, other delegates were having similar difficulties processing what they had witnessed. Marcus began putting his restraint gear back on. Each piece that clicked into place seemed to diminish him somehow. The predatory grace faded. His movements became more measured and careful. His presence contracted back to normal human parameters. By the time he had reattached the neural inhibitor, he looked like the same humble, slightly primitive human who had entered the chamber. But now every being in the observation deck understood what they were really looking at. "I should explain something," Marcus said as he finished securing his equipment. "The diplomatic protocol exists for a reason. Humans learned early in our contact with other species that showing our full capabilities tends to make people uncomfortable." He gestured toward the observation deck, where delegates were still standing in shocked silence. "We're not trying to deceive anyone. We're trying to be good neighbors. We limit ourselves because we want to be part of the galactic community, not rule it." Marcus picked up his simple plastic water bottle and took a drink. Such a basic, harmless action, but now it seemed loaded with meaning. "But you wanted to test us, Commander Veltara. You wanted to see what humans are really capable of. I hope this has been educational." He walked toward the chamber exit, his heavy boots making their familiar echoing sounds on the metal floor. "Trial Administrator," he called to the robot. "I believe the remaining trials have been postponed." "Correct," the robot replied. "The Galactic Combat Championship has been suspended pending review of safety regulations and participant classification protocols."